All right, so today we're diving deep into something pretty unsettling, and that is the bomb threats that were sent to over 40 schools in Delhi.
Yeah.
This is one of those stories that is unfortunately increasingly relevant.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to try to unpack not just what happened, but also kind of what this says about the state of school safety in India today.
Absolutely.
Our sources for this deep dive are a bunch of different news articles from Republic World.
Okay.
Today, News, The Economic Times, The Times of India, and The Logical Indian.
Mm-hmm.
We'll also be looking at BBC News for some international perspective and some insights from the Indian Express.
Sounds good.
So just imagine you're a parent in Delhi, going about your day,
Yeah.
and suddenly you hear that your child's school has received a bomb threat.
Oh, my goodness.
That heart-stopping moment is where we're starting today.
It really highlights the vulnerability we feel, when it comes to our children's safety, and especially in a place that's supposed to be a sanctuary for learning.
Exactly. And that's what makes these threats so insidious.
Yeah.
So let's get into the details of the emails themselves.
Yeah.
What kind of language were we dealing with here?
I mean, it was chilling, to put it mildly.
Oh, wow.
Both Republic World and Today News actually published excerpts.
Okay.
And phrases like, "You all deserve to suffer and lose limbs."
It's just, it sends shivers down your spine.
Oh, really does.
This wasn't just some vague warning. It was graphic and very clearly intended to instill terror.
Wow, that's awful.
Yeah.
Did they mention anything about the bombs themselves?
They did, actually.
Okay.
The emails claimed that multiple bombs had been planted in the schools.
Oh, wow.
They even specified that they were using leadazide.
Leadazide. And is that like a...
Leadazide is a highly sensitive explosive
Oh.
that's primarily used in detonators.
Okay.
So it's not something you typically find just lying around.
So do you think mentioning this very specific compound, was that like a tactic to try and make the threat seem more credible?
I think it's certainly possible.
By using a technical term, they might have been trying to, sound like they knew what they were talking about, project a sense of knowledge and capability, and of course,
Right.
amplify the fear factor.
Right.
Absolutely.
And was there any indication of why they were targeting these schools?
Well, the emails contained a ransom demand of
Okay.
$30,000, which is about 24 lakh,
Okay.
and it was sent from an email address, scottylonzo@gmail.com. Which sounds a little suspicious to me, to say the least.
Right. I mean, that doesn't exactly scream criminal mastermind.
No, it does not.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder, what's going on there?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it?
It is.
It could be an attempt to just throw off investigators,
Okay.
but you also have to consider the possibility that it's, some kind of a warped sense of humor, or
Okay.
maybe a desire to kind of put their own signature on it, however twisted that might be,
Okay. So these terrifying emails land in these inboxes of all these different school administrators. What happens next?
Well, from what we've gathered from various reports, the response was very decisive
Okay.
and very swift.
Okay.
A lot of the schools immediately started evacuating students, prioritizing their safety above everything else.
Good.
Republic World highlighted Mother Mary's school.
Okay.
They dispersed students right away and asked parents to pick them up from specific locations.
It's just hard to imagine the chaos
Oh,
that must have ensued.
yeah.
All these parents rushing to pick up their kids.
Right.
The uncertainty, not knowing if it's real or not. I mean,
It's a nightmare.
it's terrifying.
Absolutely.
Did the authorities get involved quickly?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Multiple sources, including the Times of India, reported a huge response from police, bomb disposal squads, fire officials, you name it.
Wow.
Dog units were even brought in to search the schools.
Really?
It was an all-hands-on-deck situation.
So they weren't taking any chances?
Nope, not at all.
Okay. And thankfully, no bombs were found, right?
Thankfully, no.
Okay.
Every school was thoroughly searched and nothing turned up.
Yeah.
It does seem, at least for now, that the threat was a hoax.
Right. But even if it's a hoax,
Exactly.
the disruption, the fear, all of that is very real.
Absolutely.
So how often does something like this happen?
That's where things get even more concerning.
Okay.
The Indian Express and BBC News both pointed out that this isn't an isolated incident.
Right.
Just this year, similar threats were made against schools in Delhi in May and August.
Oh, wow.
And it's not just schools either. Even airports and hospitals have been targeted.
So this seems to be part of a pretty disturbing trend.
It does. It does.
Is this a security lapse or is there something bigger going on here?
Those are exactly the questions that authorities are grappling with.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that because of this recent wave of threats,
Mm-hmm.
the Delhi High Court actually took a really proactive step.
Really? What did they do?
In November, they issued a directive to the Delhi government and the Delhi police,
Okay.
basically telling them to get their act together.
Oh, wow.
They were told to come up with a comprehensive plan
Okay.
and a standard operating procedure for dealing with these bomb threats,
Mm-hmm.
and they have 8 weeks to finalize it.
Yeah.
So they're on the clock.
So at least it seems like the higher-ups are recognizing that this is serious and needs a systemic response.
Right.
For sure. But before we dive into potential solutions, let's look at the human element of this story.
Okay.
How did all the parents and the students react to having to evacuate?
Understandably, there was a lot of fear and anxiety.
Yeah.
The Times of India even quoted a parent who expressed their frustration, saying it was the second time this year their child's education had been disrupted because of a bomb threat.
It's awful.
You can feel their exhaustion, their helplessness. It's just,
Yeah, it's a lot.
it is.
I mean, what's the long-term impact on these kids? Being forced to evacuate under the threat of violence. That's got to be traumatic.
It's a crucial point, and it often gets overlooked in the aftermath of something like this.
Yeah.
The psychological toll on these students, the potential for anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
it just erodes their sense of security.
Yeah,
These are all issues that need to be addressed.
absolutely. And it's not just the students either.
Right.
It's the parents as well.
Yeah, dealing with the fear and the uncertainty and the scramble to make sure their kids are safe.
Right.
It's a lot.
Okay, so we've established the nature of these threats,
Yes.
the response from the schools and the authorities,
Mm-hmm.
the very real impact this is having on the students and the parents.
Absolutely.
But there's a huge piece of the puzzle still missing.
Which is,
Who is behind this?
yeah.
And are the authorities any closer to finding them?
Yeah. The investigation, that's the big mystery, isn't it?
Right. And it's easy to say the police are looking into it, but what does that actually mean?
Well, several sources mention that the investigations are ongoing,
Yeah.
but obviously the details are pretty scarce.
Yeah.
But based on what we know about these kinds of investigations,
Okay.
we can piece together a likely scenario.
And so what would that look like?
So first of all, they'll be carefully analyzing those emails,
Okay.
looking at the language, any technical details, any
yeah.
patterns, anything that might point to the sender.
So like they do in the movies, tracing IP addresses and stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
They'll be trying to trace the origin of those emails, which can be tough.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible.
Right.
And they'll also be looking for similarities to other threats,
Okay.
both in Delhi and elsewhere, to see if there's a connection or a pattern.
I mean, could this be like a copycat thing?
Oh, absolutely. That's definitely a possibility.
Right. Like someone saw this tactic work and decided to try it.
Exactly. And if that's the case,
Yeah.
it really makes you think about the role of the media in all of this. Well, if the coverage is too sensationalized,
Right.
or if they give too many details about the threats,
Yeah.
it could actually end up giving someone else ideas.
Wow. Yeah. So it's like this double-edged sword
It is.
where the public needs to know what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
but too much information could be dangerous.
Exactly.
What about the non-digital side of things?
Right.
Are they interviewing people, gathering witness statements, things like that?
Of course, they'll be talking to school staff,
Okay.
students, anyone who might have seen something suspicious,
Yeah.
or anyone who might have a word to target the schools.
Okay.
It's really a combination of old school detective work and modern technology.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly complicated.
It is.
I mean, trying to find one person on the internet
Yeah.
based on an anonymous email,
Yeah.
it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
It's definitely a challenge.
Right.
But hopefully, with enough time and resources,
Yeah,
the authorities will figure it out.
let's hope so. But until then, we have all these questions and this unease.
Uh-huh.
So what can we do to prevent this from happening again?
Right.
We talked about the High Court's directive for an action plan,
Yes.
but what would that actually look like?
Well, the Logical Indian had some pretty sensible recommendations.
Okay.
First of all, they highlighted the need for better security in schools.
Okay, like what kind of things?
Things like having trained security personnel,
Okay.
stricter visitor protocols, maybe even surveillance systems.
So basically making the schools harder to target.
Exactly. They also emphasized the importance of community vigilance.
Okay.
So that means parents, teachers, even students themselves.
Right.
Everyone needs to be more aware,
Yeah.
report anything suspicious, and work together to create a culture of safety.
So it's not just about, like, physical barriers.
No,
It's about everyone being proactive.
exactly.
But we also talked about how this isn't just a problem for schools, it's a problem for society.
Right.
So what role does the government have in all of this?
Well, The logical Indian argued that the government needs to work more closely with schools.
Okay.
Imagine a system where they're sharing information in real time,
Right.
doing joint risk assessments,
Okay.
coming up with coordinated plans.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of collaboration could be a game changer.
Right. So it's not just everyone doing their own thing.
No.
It's about having a unified response.
Exactly.
But we also need to talk about how to support the students and parents who are dealing with the aftermath of all this. I
Absolutely.
can't forget about that.
The Times of India mentioned the need for counseling services and support groups.
Yeah.
Maybe even having age-appropriate conversations in classrooms.
Right. Just acknowledging that even if nobody got hurt, it's still traumatic.
Exactly. It's about giving people the tools they need to process what happened
Mm-hmm.
and to be more resilient in the future.
Okay, so we've explored the investigation, the ways to prevent this from happening again,
Yeah.
and how to support those affected.
Right.
But there's another layer here that we can't ignore, which is...
The politics.
Mhm.
We talked about the blame game between the local and national governments.
Right.
And it's tempting to dismiss it as just politics as usual,
It is.
but it does say something about the complexities of responsibility in a situation like this.
Absolutely. You've got the local government who are responsible for the day-to-day,
Right.
pointing fingers at the central government, saying they're not getting enough resources.
Okay.
And then you've got the central government pushing back, saying it's a local issue.
Okay.
It's just a classic jurisdictional tug of war.
It is.
Everyone's trying to avoid blame.
And protect their own interests.
Exactly.
But where does that leave the schools and the parents and the kids who are stuck in the middle?
Right. It's frustrating.
It is.
Because even when you're talking about something as serious as kids' safety,
Yeah.
politics often gets in the way of finding solutions.
It's a good point.
It is.
But beyond assigning blame, can anything good come out of this?
I think so.
If this can spark a real conversation about how to keep schools safe,
Yeah.
if it can lead to better communication between different levels of government, and if it can clarify who's responsible for what,
Okay.
then maybe something positive can come out of this.
So it's about turning this crisis into an opportunity for reform.
Exactly.
But even with all the talk about security and politics, we still have to ask ourselves, why
Right.
target schools in the first place?
Yeah, why cause so much fear and disruption?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, and unfortunately, without knowing who did this and why,
Yeah.
it's impossible to give a definitive answer.
But we can speculate a little, right?
We
I
think,
mean, based on what we've seen in other cases, what are some possible explanations?
well, as we discussed earlier, the copycat theory is pretty plausible.
Uh-huh.
Someone who's looking for attention, copying something they saw somewhere else.
It's a disturbing thought
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
someone would exploit other people's fear for their own amusement. What other motives might there be?
Well, there's always the possibility of a personal grudge.
Right.
A disgruntled former student,
Right.
a disgruntled employee,
Very
someone who wants revenge against a particular school or the whole education system.
What? So a motive rooted in anger or resentment?
Exactly.
Could it be something more sinister, like politically motivated?
It's possible.
Right. Trying to destabilize the government,
Mm-hmm.
create chaos, undermine trust,
It's been done before.
and using schools as the target.
Right.
That just amplifies everything.
It does.
It's a horrible way to make a statement, but it would be effective.
Absolutely.
But before we get too lost in the worst-case scenarios,
Yeah.
we have to consider the simplest explanation.
You're thinking it was just a prank.
Exactly. A really messed up prank.
Right. It's something we see a lot these days.
Mm-hmm.
People, especially young people, they
Yeah.
don't always realize how serious their actions can be. They
Right.
think it's all fun and games until the real world consequences hit.
It's a good reminder that words have power, even online.
Absolutely.
But this wasn't just words on a screen. This caused a huge disruption. It affected thousands of people.
Uh-huh.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
what's the big takeaway for our listeners?
I think the main point here is that even though this was a terrifying incident,
Yeah.
it's also a wake-up call.
Okay.
School safety is a complex issue,
Mm-hmm.
and there are no easy answers.
Right.
It requires everyone to be vigilant, to work together,
Yeah.
and to be prepared to deal with not just the physical threats,
Right.
but also the emotional and psychological impact.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this.
It
Like
is.
there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
But as we've discussed,
Mm-hmm.
there are things we can do both individually and as a society
Absolutely.
to make a difference.
And hopefully, by talking about these difficult topics,
Yeah.
we can start to create a safer and more resilient world for our children.
Well said.
Thank you.
And on that note, We've come to the end of our look into the Delhi school bomb threats.
But before we sign off completely, there's
Okay.
one final thought I want to leave you with.
All right, lay it on me. What's this final thought?
It goes back to that email address they used, scottylonzo@gmail.com.
Right, it just seems so, I don't know.
Odd.
Yeah, like out of place with something so serious.
Exactly. We talked about what might be going on psychologically with that.
Mhm.
But what if it's a clue to something bigger?
Okay, I'm listening.
What if it points to a desensitization to violence and to fear, like as a society?
Wow, so you're saying this isn't just about one person or one group,
Yeah.
but something more widespread.
Exactly. Think about it. We see violence and threats everywhere, every day.
That's true.
In movies, in video games, on social media.
Yeah.
It's just become background noise.
So you're saying that maybe we're getting used to it.
In a way, yeah.
And because of that, something like this bomb threat
Mm-hmm.
doesn't hit us as hard as it should.
It's a possibility, right?
Yeah, I mean, what if we're just becoming numb to this kind of stuff?
Exactly.
And if that's true, I mean, what else are we missing?
But what other threats are we not taking seriously?
It's a scary thought.
It
This
is-
incident is disturbing enough as it is.
Yeah.
But if it's a symptom of something bigger,
Right.
that's even worse.
It really makes you think about how we respond to threats as a society.
It does. It makes you think about what's really important
Absolutely.
and what we need to do to protect ourselves and each other. Well said.
Thank you.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the Delhi school bomb threats.
Yeah, it's been a heavy one.
It has, but I think it's been an important one.
I agree.
As always, knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
The more we understand these threats, the better we can deal with them.
I think that's a good note to end on.
It is. So to everyone listening, stay safe out there
Stay safe.
and keep those critical thinking caps on.